for the reasons you would think.
Yeah, now while her case and others like it are incredibly tragic, and they're very hard stories to hear, the very hard thing to do for families is to experience it, but it's also become a social media obsession. It's shining a light on a deeper conversation that's being had right now and throughout the years. It's something called missing white woman syndrome.
Yeah, so it's a hard conversation for many people to have because it forces us to confront our internal bias, but we're going to dig deeper and stay true to our brand by adding more context to this conversation a little later. But before we do that, we do want to start off with the latest on the investigation into Gabby's disappearance.
On Tuesday, the FBI did confirm that the body discovered over the weekend at the Wyoming National Park does belong to Gabby.
So according to the FBI, the autopsy determines her initial manner of death is homicide, but her cause of death still pending. But now all eyes are on the Petito family since the last thing we heard from her family's attorney was that they would release a statement when Gabby is home.
But let's talk about Gabby's fiance, Brian Laundrie. On Tuesday, the search for him resumed. He's named a person of interest in the investigation, but has not been charged with a crime or even named as a suspect in a crime at this point.
So Laundrie disappeared about a week ago. His parents say they last saw him on September 14th when he left to go on a hike at the Carlton Reserve. Now, police are searching that 25,000-acre nature reserve near his family's home in Northport, Florida. They're focusing on a specific part of the reserve and its adjoining lands.
On Monday, the FBI searched the Florida home where Laundrie and Petito were living with his parents. And during that search, the family's lawyer was supposed to hold a press conference on Tuesday, but says it was canceled after his conversation with the FBI. I want to bring in private investigator Harvey Morse to further discuss this case. Now, in addition, he is the president of investigative agency Locators International. Harvey, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us here on NBC LX. Let's start here, though. What makes finding Brian Laundrie so difficult?
Well, first, let me express my condolences to the family. It's a heartbreaking situation. What makes it difficult is here you have an individual that's used to living off the grid. He's used to living in a van. He's not looking for any of the things in life that most of us would look for when we were traveling. And he's experienced that he is capable of staying in hiding. And, you know, we can't negate the fact that COVID is actually working to his benefit. He can wear a mask. No one's going to question him. He can put a hat on and walk down Main Street, and the likelihood of somebody identifying him is nil.
Harvey, you just brought up so many points that I haven't even thought of yet, so I appreciate you starting there. And this week, the FBI, they actually searched Brian Laundrie's Florida home. Now, what potential evidence might investigators have looked for?
Well, I think that what they would be looking for primarily would be evidence on electronic devices. Did he communicate with his parents, cell phones, emails, photos? He had sufficient time to dispose of any blood stains on clothing, if that were even an existent item, because we don't really know how Gabby died at this point in time. I'd also be looking for other girlfriends, calls he might have made on his way home to his parents, friends, or family. And he said at one point when he had the stop in Utah that he didn't have a cell phone. But, you know, people go out and buy these untraceable burner phones, and I don't see somebody driving 2,500 miles by themselves without having any communication.
And speaking of communication, the last message sent from Gabby's phone to her mother, it says, "Can you help Stan? I just keep getting his voicemails and missed calls." Now, according to an affidavit, Stan is the name of Gabby's grandfather, but Gabby's mother told police that her daughter never called him Stan. Does this raise any concerns or questions for you?
Absolutely. To me, with knowing what I know from past experience in working cases like this, both from a law enforcement and a private sector point of view, it appears as though she was trying to send a message. And the message was something is wrong, and was perhaps hoping that somebody would contact law enforcement and do what we call a well-being check. Notify law enforcement, have them send somebody out, and see if she was okay.
That's interesting. What about the theory some people say that that text message wasn't sent from her?
Well, that's something we won't know based on what we know now until we see what the various communication forms were used and by who.
Which is why the police obviously were searching Brian Laundrie's house, which we talked about. But in all of this, we also have to focus on the fact that people on social media believe that they're helping with this investigation. There's so many eyes on this. But does it actually make the job of law enforcement harder or easier?
Well, if one of them could identify him, it would make it easier. The problem you have is that law enforcement is limited in numbers of people. And the more leads you have, the more people are running around in different directions and perhaps losing focus as to where they really ought to be looking. But you have to understand that the citizens are really trying their best to help. And law enforcement is appreciative of any assistance that the public would give them, but sometimes it's overwhelming. There are a lot of people that look like Brian, and therefore a tremendous amount of leads are pouring in from all over.
And Harvey, we brought you on not because you're directly involved in the case, but because you have so much experience. So can you tell me even a little bit more about any cases that you've covered that are similar to what we're seeing with the Gabby Petito case?
Well, I can't give you specific details, but I can tell you that the elements in this case are not unlike other cases of missing people. This one is a little bit strange in as much as here comes Brian home. There's a 10-day period before Gabby's reported missing. He has to be saying something to his parents. And his parents, in my opinion, have a good chance of being complicit, at least as assisting and aiding him. For example, how did his parents know where to find the van that he left in the swamplands? He left the house. He supposedly didn't tell his parents where he was going, yet they went and found the van and picked it up and took it somewhere. Well, that leaves an interesting message. Did somebody else pick him up? Was that pre-planned?
Harvey Morse, we appreciate you taking the time to talk to us here on NBC LX.
So the couple, they